This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Ahoy, adventurers, and welcome to another episode of Travel with Lara and Luca. Today, we're embarking on a virtual journey to the extraordinary city of Vienna.
That's right, Luca. Vienna, or Wien as the locals call it, is a city brimming with culture, music, and an undeniable charm that sweeps you off your feet. Or should I say, waltzes you away?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as you step into those historic streets, it's like being invited to the grandest ball of them all. But it's not all about the dancing, is it, Lara?
No, it's not. Vienna is like an onion, layers upon layers of history, art, and some of the most incredible sights you'll ever see. That's what today's episode is all about, exploring the gems of Vienna with your favorite travel buddies, us.
Indeed, and what a ride we have planned. We'll start by discussing iconic sites where emperors once walked and composers once created their masterpieces.
And let's not forget the delightful Austrian cuisine. I can almost taste that Wiener Schnitzel already.
Don't get me started on the desserts. My sweet tooth is already aching for a slice of Sacher-Torte. You'll want to stick around as we uncover the culinary treasures that await in Vienna.
But for those of you who fancy the road less traveled, we have a treat in store for you as well. We're taking a deep dive into Vienna's hidden gems, the places that even some locals might overlook.
And we'll be weaving all these topics with our personal tales from Vienna. My favorite one involves a street artist, a mispronounced German word, and a rather confused but friendly local.
I remember that story. You got to hear it, folks. It's hilarious. That's Vienna for you, full of unexpected encounters and the charm of old Europe mixed with modern vibrancy. Where else can you find a city that's both incredibly grand and intimately cozy?
Speaking of grand, our must-see places segment will include spots you simply can't miss on your Viennese escapade, from lavish palaces to the Danube's blue waves.
And let's not neglect the quirkier side of things. Vienna has its fair share of weird facts, doesn't it, Luca?
Oh, absolutely. Did you know about the peculiar habit of the Viennese and their love for a certain pastry that isn't exactly what it seems?
Oh, the suspense. You'll have to wait for that segment, my curious friends. But trust me, it's worth the wait.
And for the history buffs among us, we'll be digging deep into Vienna's past, from the days of the Habsburgs to its influence on the world as we know it.
After that enlightening foray into the annals of time, we'll share some expert travel tips, from navigating Vienna's public transport to insider knowledge on experiencing the city's culture to the fullest.
We're armed with lots of useful hints to make your trip smooth and spectacular. Plus, I might even teach you how to order a coffee Vienna style.
Finally, we've got side excursions you can embark on to widen your Austrian adventure. Trust me, there's a lot more to see just a stone's throw away from Vienna.
All right then, hold on to your Sacher-Torte. Our Vienna voyage is about to commence. Iconic sights. You say Vienna, and your imagination just runs wild with images of grand palaces, towering spires, and streets that are a veritable open-air museum.
Absolutely, Luca, and where better to start our journey than the Baroque splendor of Schönbrunn Palace? Walking through those imperial staterooms, I always feel a bit like royalty. I half expect someone to hand me a crown.
Oh, Lara, a crown wouldn't do you justice. But, standing in the Gloriette and looking over Vienna, it's hard not to feel a bit majestic. It's like that view encapsulates the grandeur of an entire empire.
From every corner and every garden, Schönbrunn tells a story. Remember the time we tried to count all of Maria Theresa's children in the paintings?
I lost track after 10. Good thing she had that many to keep the Habsburg dynasty going strong.
Speaking of going strong, how about St. Stephen's Cathedral? That towering Gothic structure has been the heart of Vienna for centuries. I mean, you can't think of Vienna without picturing its tiled roof.
True, that roof is more colorful than my entire wardrobe. But have you ever climbed the 343 steps to the tower? The view's worth it, but boy, are my legs not friends with me after that.
That's the best kind of workout. And once you're up there, you can play spot the tourist looking lost around the Graben.
Guilty as charged. But come on, let's glide over to something a little lighter, the Belvedere Palace. Its gardens are where nature meets art. It's like walking through a painting.
Absolutely, Luca. And inside you're greeted by none other than Klimt's The Kiss. Its shimmering gold everywhere makes me wish I had better taste in jewelry.
Hey, if Klimt designed jewelry, we'd all be in trouble. And remember those Baroque gardens? You could waltz through them all day and still find new secrets around every corner.
And if our dear listeners are hankering for an encore, they should be poised for the Vienna State Opera. Even I'd throw on a ball gown for a night at the opera. The acoustics alone are a marvel, don't you think?
Oh, they're sublime. I tried singing once there. Just once. Let's just say the ghosts of great composers were not amused.
They probably thought it was modern art, my dear. Speaking of which, the Ringstrasse is the perfect blend of old and new. A grand boulevard fit for emperors.
Empress Lara riding down the Ringstrasse in her carriage. But on a serious note, those historic buildings, the Parliament, City Hall, the University, they're like Vienna's who's who of architecture.
Every building tells a part of Vienna's story, and to think they nearly built a railroad there.
Thank heavens for good city planning. Speaking of planning, what deliciousness are we uncovering next?
Stick with us as we indulge in Vienna's culinary delights. Think succulent schnitzels, decadent desserts, and bustling markets. That's up next.
Welcome back to Travel with Lara and Luca, where we're diving into the delicious cuisine of Vienna. Viennese food, when perfection meets a plate.
Oh, Luca, we're starting with the classic, aren't we? The Viennese schnitzel, thin, crispy, and golden. But tell me, do you prefer the lemon squeeze, or are you a purist?
Lara, I'm a bit of a maverick here. I say why not both? A little zing of lemon brightens the schnitzel, but every now and then I'll have it unadorned to appreciate the simplicity.
I knew you'd sit on the fence. Anyway, just so our listeners know, this delectable dish is traditionally made with veal, pounded thin, breaded, and fried to that perfect, crunchy finish.
But have you ever seen how they make it here, Lara? It's an art form, almost like a dance of the chef and his frying pan. The key is to swim it in enough oil so it floats. A floating schnitzel is a good schnitzel.
Right you are. And let's not forget about the sidekick, the Erdäpfelsalat, that potato salad with a tangy mustardy twist. It's a true harmony of flavors.
Speaking of perfection, onto the Sacher-Torte. Lara, have you ever met a chocolate cake more famous than this one?
Not in this lifetime, Luca. Dense chocolate sponge, apricot jam, and dark chocolate icing. It's the Mona Lisa of pastries. And you have to eat it with a dollop of unsweetened whipped cream, schlagobers.
It's like they say, a day without schlagobers is like a day without sunshine. But this Sacher-Torte, it's not just about the cake, it's about where you eat it. The grandeur of Vienna's coffeehouses, with their chandeliers and tuxedoed waiters, that's part of the experience.
Yes, those coffeehouses are institutions. Marble tables, newspapers on wooden holders, and a melange, that's the coffee, waiting to wake up your senses.
And it's there you'll hear the best gossip in town, always served up with a side of Sacher-Torte. But moving on from the sweeter side of things, let's wander into the Naschmarkt, shall we?
Picture this, rows upon rows of stalls, each one a cornucopia spilling over with exotic spices, colorful fruits, fresh fish straight from the Danube, and mountains of cheese that seem to go on forever.
And the characters you meet. Do you remember that cheese vendor who insisted we try every cheese from mild to this will kick you in the teeth strong?
How could I forget? He had a cheese that was so pungent it could start its own revolution. But remember what you're there for, to taste and discover. The Naschmarkt is an edible museum of Austrian and international delights.
Now, if you want to talk about hearty Austrian dishes, we must mention goulash. It's a spicy hug in a bowl, not originally from Austria, but embraced with such love here.
You can find a good goulash at those cozy little taverns called Basil's. And when you dive into that tender beef stewed in a rich paprika sauce, Vienna starts feeling like home, no matter where you're from.
Goulash pairs well with a pint of local beer, but we're in Vienna, so let's not forget the wine, especially a lovely glass from the nearby Vienna Woods vineyards.
Vienna is the only world capital which produces a significant amount of wine within its city limits. The wine taverns, or Heurigen, dot the outskirts of the city, offering a pastoral escape with a side of Gruner Veltliner.
That last visit we had to a Heurigen where we toasted to the grapevines and almost became part of the Harvest Festival. Good thing we remembered we had a podcast to host, eh?
The folks must have thought we were part of the entertainment program. But you know, after all this gourmand talk, we should hint at what's next.
That's right, our dear Epicureans. If you've enjoyed feasting on this conversation about Viennese cuisine, just wait till we reveal the city's hidden gems.
Think secret courtyards, whimsical art, and stories that even Google doesn't know about. Stay tuned as the next segment of Travel with Lara and Luca uncovers Vienna's treasures that lie off the beaten path. So we've gazed in awe at Vienna's iconic sights, but now it's time to pull back the curtain on this city's hidden gems.
Indeed, these are the places that don't always make it onto the glossy brochures, but capture the true heart of Vienna.
First up, it's impossible not to mention the Hundertwasser house. Luca, do you remember the first time you saw it?
How could I forget? You mean the apartment building that looks like it's been plucked from a vibrant, eco-conscious fairy tale?
Exactly that one. With its uneven floors and a roof covered in earth and grass, it's like walking into a different world.
Ah, Hundertwasser, the man who must have had a vendetta against straight lines. Every curve and color a statement against bland urban life.
And they say architects don't have a sense of humor. Let's give our listeners a moment to imagine a world where every building is a piece of living art.
And imagine no more. Just take a trip to Vienna's very own dreamlike creation.
Speaking of imaginative spaces, let's take a virtual stroll through Spittelberg. Not many tourists know about this charming neighborhood.
It's like stepping back in time, isn't it? The cobblestone alleys, the Biedermeier-era buildings, there's a story behind every corner.
And if those walls could talk, they would whisper tales of bohemians and artists. Nowadays, those same alleys are home to quirky boutiques and craft shops.
Oh, and don't forget those intimate little cafes where you can just sit and soak in the ambiance. I once spent an entire afternoon watching the world go by with a cup of melange in hand.
That does sound like a day well spent. Now let's turn the clock hands at our next stop, the Clock Museum.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to tick-tock around the place with over 1,000 timepieces.
From grand floor-standing clocks to delicate pocket watches, it's like a waltz through time, literally.
And who knew there was so much drama in the world of timekeeping? Remember the story you told me about the rivalry between clockmakers?
Oh yes, the timepiece turf wars. But here, all is peaceful, the only competition being between the chimes that mark the hour.
A place like that really makes you appreciate the artistry of days gone by. Speaking of appreciation, do you remember our visit to the Zentralfriedhof?
How could I not? It's one of Europe's largest cemeteries, but there's something incredibly tranquil about it.
You wouldn't expect to say a cemetery is brimming with life, but with its diverse flora and fauna, it's a conservation area as well.
Not to mention the famous souls resting there, musicians, poets, Beethoven, Schubert. It's a veritable who's who of Viennese legends.
And a ghost tour that doesn't need to try hard to spook you. I still get goosebumps thinking of the eerie melody that seemed to follow us.
Let's not scare our listeners away. Instead, let's invite them to explore Vienna's art world beyond the more famous galleries.
Oh, the joy of discovering a new favorite artist hidden away in some studio gallery where the paint practically still smells fresh on the canvas.
And those passionate gallery owners who could talk for hours about the techniques, the inspirations. Art really is alive in Vienna.
Yes, you'll walk in for a quick look and leave with a head full of stories and perhaps a piece of art under your arm.
Vienna seems to have that effect on people. But now it's time to leave the hidden corners and prepare for something a bit peculiar.
Ah, a teaser for the listeners. We're about to delve into Vienna's oddities and eccentricities in the next segment.
Stay tuned as we share the city's weird facts that are stranger than fiction. You won't want to miss it. So for this part of Travel with Lara and Luca, we're diving into the must-see places of Vienna. You can't say you've visited Vienna without stopping by these spots.
Absolutely. And first on the list has to be the Museum Quartier, one of the largest districts for contemporary art and culture in the world. Imagine strolling from one modern art installation to another with the old imperial city as your backdrop.
You just can't help but feel the vibe, right? The place is buzzing with artistic energy, and with bars and cafes sprinkled throughout, it's culture with a side of relaxation.
Speaking of resting in peace, the Imperial Crypt is a must-see if you're into Habsburg history. It's where generations of Austria's most significant royal family lie entombed.
It might sound morbid to some, but there's a strange beauty in the ornate metal sarcophagi and the history they hold.
And isn't there that crypt guardian with the twirly mustache? He's like a character straight out of a Gothic novel.
Oh, the stories he could tell. Now, for a breath of fresh air, we simply must talk about the Vienna woods, the city's green lungs.
A haven for nature lovers and hikers, the Vienna woods are dotted with vineyards and ancient monasteries. There's nothing like catching a glimpse of Vienna from atop Kahlenberg Hill with the Danube sparkling below. Pure poetry.
You could almost hear Strauss serenading you with his Blue Danube Waltz. Speaking of which, let's not forget the Prater amusement park. No visit to Vienna is complete without a ride on the iconic Riesenrad Ferris wheel.
Oh, the Prater is a must. Remember when we dared each other on the ghost train? Your scream was heard all the way to Salzburg.
Haha, very funny. But you have to admit that was a top-notch haunted house. Plus, the mix of historic and modern rides is something you don't see every day.
True that. And rounding off our must-see places is the Blue Danube itself. This river is not just about a catchy waltz. It's about the life it brings to the city.
Absolutely. And you know, there's something meditative about watching the riverboats glide by. It's like time slows down just enough for you to take it all in.
Now, in our next segment, we'll peel back the city's shiny exterior to reveal some weird facts about Vienna.
Oh, buckle up for that one. Vienna is not short on the weird and wonderful.
So welcome back, dear listeners. We've just had a whirlwind tour of Vienna's must-see places, but now get ready for something a bit more off-kilter in our upcoming segment, Weird Facts About Vienna. Are you ready to delve into the peculiarities of this city, Lara?
Oh, I'm more than ready, Luca. Vienna has this polished, grand exterior, but like any great city, it's got its quirks. Let's start with something that might surprise many of our animal-loving listeners. Vienna is home to the oldest zoo in the world, Tiergarten Schönbrunn, dating back to 1752.
That's right, a zoo older than the United States. It was originally the Imperial Menagerie, and clearly, these animals were living it up palace-style before it even became a public spectacle.
Imagine being a penguin and your address is a palace in Vienna. Now that's what I call fancy feathers. Next up, did you know the humble Kaisersemmel played a significant role in Vienna's history?
That's just a plain, crusty roll, right?
Yes, but legend has it that the roll's design was originally modeled after the emperor's mustache, giving the people a chance to literally devour the essence of their ruler with every bite.
Sounds like the tastiest bit of megalomania I've ever heard. But let's not get crumbs in our next fascinating tidbit, Vienna's Funeral Museum. With more than 1,000 items in its collection, this museum takes you through a rather macabre history of how Viennese have dealt with death.
Only in Vienna would you find an entire museum dedicated to hearses and mourning attire. It seems their motto was "Go big and go ghoulish" when it came to farewells. It puts a new spin on rest in peace, doesn't it?
From somber to the slightly surreal now, let's talk about the Esperanto Museum. Yes, Vienna has a museum for a language that was meant to unite the world but never quite caught on.
I wonder if they offer audio guides in Esperanto? That'd be quite the immersive experience. And how about this for a funny, flaky fact? The croissant. Now, most would say this pastry screams France, right?
Mais oui, but there's a street in this very city that could lay claim to its origins. The legend says it was Viennese bakers who first crafted the crescent to celebrate defeating the Ottomans and their crescent moon symbols.
Ah, consuming the symbol of your enemy in pastry form. Delicious victory indeed. But folks, don't go anywhere because when we return, we'll be diving deep into the historical heart of Vienna in our next segment, a place where the past isn't just remembered, it's relived. Fa la la,
Welcome back, history buffs. This is where Vienna really shines in its rich history. I mean, just saying the word Habsburg feels like you're opening a grand old book, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Luca. The Habsburgs are like the main characters in that book, a dynasty that shaped not just Vienna but the whole of Europe for centuries. It's like a royal telenovela with all the drama, intrigue, and fancy outfits.
But let's not spoil all the juicy details yet. Let's take our listeners back, way back. Lara, you've been brushing up on your medieval history again, haven't you?
Guilty as charged. The Habsburgs start to really flex their royal muscles back in the 13th century. It's like they're collecting kingdoms and dukedoms as if they're limited edition vinyl records. And
boy, did they collect them. From Austria to Spain, from Hungary to Mexico. A true empire where the sun never set, just the moon doing the rounds, checking if everyone's tucked in bed.
Not to forget, though, it's because of all that wealth and pomp that Vienna blossomed into the city we're obsessed with today. The Hofburg Palace alone is like a timeline in architecture. Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, you name it, they've got it.
Speaking of Baroque, nobody did drama and flamboyance quite like Empress Maria Theresa. She had 16 children, implemented reforms, and basically was a one-woman powerhouse.
And one of those kids, Marie Antoinette, would find herself whispering, "Let them eat cake" over in France. Talk about a mother's influence, ha!
Not exactly a fairy tale ending there, but hey, that's history for you. It's all fun and games until someone loses a head.
Dark, Luca. But it's true, and in a twist, Marie Antoinette's little sis, Maria Carolina, was in Naples doing her own queenly things. They're like the Kardashians of the 18th century, but with more statecraft and fewer Instagram followers.
Fast forward to the 19th century, and we hit another beat, the Congress of Vienna. It's 1814, and all of Europe's who's who land in Vienna for the ultimate post-Napoleonic get-together.
The Congress doesn't just redraw the map of Europe, it sets the stage for an entire century. Plus, there were some epic parties, diplomacy by day, waltzing by night.
Imagine getting your state policy mixed up with your dance steps. Oops, dropped the Duchess during our waltz. I guess her country's mine now.
As we glide into the 20th century, though, things get quite heavy. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. Yes, kids. That's the one that sparked World War I.
That shot really did echo around the world. Before you know it, empires are crumbling. And by 1918, it's goodnight Habsburgs. Vienna's left standing there like, now what?
Well, now what turns out to be a hefty dose of art psychology and a bit of, must we always have an empire?
Cue Sigmund Freud, sitting in his chair, stroking his beard and saying, tell me about your Habsburg-related feelings.
Talk about your inner turmoil, eh? Vienna's always been this hotbed of intellectual fire. Freud, Schnitzel, Klimt, they're all stirring the pot, thinking deep thoughts and pushing boundaries.
You've got to love Klimt. While Europe's getting its gears on for another war, this sparkle-loving dude is out there laying gold leaf on everything. The kiss is basically foreplay in paint form.
Artistic license aside, the Second World War does leave its mark on Vienna. Occupied by the Allies post-war, the city's got an air of the third man about it. You can almost hear zither music floating in from the alleyways.
It's a city that's been through the ringer, yet it still knows how to throw one heck of a ball every year. The resilience of Vienna, now, that's something to raise your Sacher-Torte to.
And let's not forget to mention how today's Vienna, with all its history, is also the capital of diplomacy. The United Nations, OSCE, OPEC, it's like the Congress of Vienna never really ended.
It's like the world decided, you know what's a great place to talk things through? Vienna. A city that's seen it all is probably the best mediator.
Speaking of talking things through, how about some pro-insider advice on how to navigate this thick plot of history? In our next segment, we'll spill the Sacher-Torte on the best travel tips. Think of it as your personalized guide through the annals of time.
Wait, did you just promise time travel? Because I'm so in for that. But until we crack that nut, listeners, stay tuned for Lara's legendary tips that'll make your Vienna trip truly epic.
Welcome back. Expert travel tips are on the agenda, right, Luca?
You bet. How to navigate the city like a Viennese, avoiding those tourist traps.
Oh, the traps are real. Let's start with the lifesaver that is public transport.
Right. Vienna's network is like clockwork. Ever get on the wrong U-Bahn, Lara?
Once or twice or 10 times. But hey, that's how you discover new places.
Ah, the accidental tourist. The key here, folks, is to grab a 24, 48, or 72-hour travel pass.
Or even the weekly pass if you're here from Monday to Monday. It's a steal.
Remember, validate your ticket before you hop on. It's a fine you don't want.
Oh, and don't be puzzled if no one's checking tickets. They have undercover inspectors.
Sneaky. Now, avoiding peak hours might sound like a no-brainer, but seriously, travel off-peak.
And whatever you do, don't miss the old-world charm of Tram 1. It's a circular route with the best views.
Yes, speaking of the best views, my top tip, get to popular sites at opening time or just before closing.
That golden hour isn't just for photos, less crowd, more serene atmosphere. Like Schönbrunn without the masses.
Speaking of serene, don't you have a weird strategy involving shoes?
Yep. Alternate your shoes. Sounds odd, but your feet will thank you after miles of cobblestones.
Next, let's chat language. How's your German coming along?
I can navigate a menu, but knowing a few polite phrases can go a long way. Wiener charm is real.
Indeed, bitte and danke, please and thank you, always bring out the smiles.
And Grüß Gott, definitely. It's the Austrian hello that opens doors and sometimes hearts.
But if you're up for some hilarious attempts, try saying Eierschwammerl.
Ah, the old chanterelle mushrooms. Great on a schnitzel, but a tongue twister.
Now on to the important part, saving money.
Ah, yes, the fine art of keeping your wallet happy. Let's tackle dining first.
Always look for Mittagsmenüs or lunch specials. It's a delicious bargain.
And steer clear of the tourist zones. Just a few blocks away, prices plummet.
Consider picnicking too. Grab some cheese, bread, and sausage from Naschmarkt for a feast in a park.
What about free museum days, Luca?
Many museums have them once a month, usually on the first Sunday. Keep your schedule flexible for this.
And for all you students, musicians, and seniors, those IDs aren't just for show. You get discounts.
Absolutely. Now let's talk timing. When should our dear listeners visit Vienna?
Off-season, my friend. Autumn and spring, fewer tourists, better rates, and Vienna still shines.
What about winter, with those enchanting Christmas markets and the snow-dusted palaces?
A dream indeed. But come January, everything's still magical, and hotels are cheaper than during market season.
Flights too. And don't forget, evening walks along the lit-up Ringstrasse are free all year round.
Poetry in motion. Last, let's not forget souvenirs. Any thoughts?
Think local, think unique. Mozartkugeln from a supermarket can be, well, too touristy.
Go to a local chocolatier instead, or snag some Austrian wine. It's a flavorful little piece of Vienna.
I always say, when life gives you schnapps,
you make friends.
Beware though, it's potent. A sip and you're singing Strauss like there's no tomorrow.
Singing or thinking you can sing, either way, it's all about the experience.
Speaking of experiences, there's more to explore just beyond Vienna's cityscape, isn't there?
Absolutely. Some might say it's where the real adventure begins.
But before we head off into the sunset, any last pearls of wisdom, Lara?
Just one. Embrace the unpredictable. Vienna is full of surprises. Let it sweep you off your feet.
Poetic as always. Well, my friends, that wraps up our expert tips. Join us next as we venture into the charming outskirts of Vienna.
Side excursions galore, from underwater parks to ancient abbeys.
And who knows, we might just find a hidden treasure or two.
So, keep your adventurous spirit ready, and we'll lead the way.
For Lara
and Luca,
stay curious, stay lively, and stay tuned. Ah, the side excursions. Sometimes the soul of travel is found just outside the city limits. Don't you think, Lara?
Absolutely, Luca. Vienna is a gem, but it's encased in a setting of charming towns and breathtaking natural beauty. Shall we start with the Grüner See, the Green Lake?
Oh, the Green Lake. You see, dear listeners, this is not your everyday lake. It's a bit of a seasonal wonder, isn't it?
It is. In the winter, it's just a park with benches and trees. But come spring, snow melt fills the basin with crystal clear water, transforming it into this underwater park.
Imagining sitting on a submerged bench or strolling underwater along paths with fish for company. Sounds surreal.
It is, but remember to just gaze and marvel. Diving and swimming are no longer allowed to protect its unique ecosystem.
Speaking of marvels, what's a side trip without a bit of wine and scenery? Picture this. You're in the Wachau Valley, glass in hand, surrounded by vineyards and apricot orchards.
The Danube River winds through, and you're tasting some of the best dry Rieslings and Gruner Veltliners around. And the apricots, they turn into delicious jams, liqueurs, and those scrumptious apricot dumplings.
Oh, those are to die for. And let's not forget the ancient monasteries and ruins dotting the landscape. Ruins that whisper tales of Richard the Lionheart, no less.
Yes, Dürnstein Castle. It's where Richard was famously held captive after the Crusades. Just thinking of those stone walls and the legends gives me goosebumps.
If you say goosebumps, I hear adventure. But if we're really talking adventure, shall we dive a bit into that capital city just a stone's throw away?
Oh, you mean Bratislava? Just about an hour from Vienna by train, and you hop from Austria into the heart of Slovakia.
I find it fascinating that you can easily flit between these capitals, each with rich histories and their own distinct vibes.
It's a place where you can roam around medieval streets, stumble upon quirky statues, and dine at some extraordinary yet low-key spots.
True. I remember that statue of the man peeking out of a manhole. They really know how to blend humor with history.
Now, for pulling the curtain on the last of today's excursions, let's paint a picture of Melk Abbey for our listeners.
Oh, just imagine ascending the heavenly staircase into this golden Baroque masterpiece perched on a rocky outcrop above the Danube. That library,
overflowing with priceless manuscripts. And the views. You've got vineyards, the river, the whole scene is straight out of a fairy tale painting.
And the spirituality of the place. It doesn't matter what beliefs you hold, the Abbey truly is a space for introspection and awe.
It's the perfect blend of splendor and serenity. And with that, we've reached the end of today's side excursion chat, but the journey's far from over.
That's right. In our next segment, we'll gather our thoughts, share some hearty laughs, and sum up this Viennese voyage. But before we embark on that conclusion, keep your wandering spirit ready for our tales of Melk Abbey. And just like the final golden rays of sun dipping behind the Hofburg Palace, we find ourselves at the end of today's Viennese voyage.
Certainly, Luca. Though our time exploring together is winding down, the memories of Vienna's grand streets, the aroma of fresh strudel, and the sounds of classical melodies linger on.
We've traversed through time, back to the days of emperors and composers, and right back around to the modern beats resonating through the city's contemporary hubs.
And oh, what a journey it's been. From Schönbrun's opulent halls to the whimsical Prater, each step through Vienna tells a story as rich as a Sacher-Torte and as complex as the patterns of a Gustav Klimt masterpiece.
Vienna is more than a city. It's a symphony, a canvas. It's a stage, a place where every boulevard speaks of history and every cobblestone keeps a secret.
But every ending is just the start of a new adventure, isn't it? And even though it's time for us to pack up our mics, the impressions of Vienna won't soon fade from our hearts, or the imaginations of our listeners, I hope.
Absolutely, Lara. If we have somehow captured even a sliver of the charm and splendor of this city for our audience, then I'd say we've succeeded.
Listeners, if you've never waltzed through the streets of Vienna, let this podcast be the spark that lights your desire. And if you have, then may our stories have been a sweet echo of your own experiences.
And now, as the Austrian evening gives way to starlight, we bid you a heartfelt Auf Wiedersehen. But remember, just as the Danube continues to ebb and flow, so do our journeys.
So true. Before we set you free into your own twilight, we want you to whisper your thoughts to us. Let us in on your Viennese dreams or your cherished memories through our social media channels.
Tell us, was there a particular story that struck a chord with you today? Or perhaps a delectable Viennese dish we should try on our next visit?
And though it's goodbye for now, the world is vast, and our Travel with Lara and Luca map has many more pins to press into its fabric.
Next time, we'll be unfolding the secrets of another mesmerizing destination. It's got the bustle, the history, the culture, but we won't give it all away just yet.
Indeed, let's keep just a little mystery alive, shall we? Until we meet again, take care of your wanderlust and keep dreaming of cobblestones and concerts, coffeehouses, and Kaiser rolls.
From Lara and myself, thank you for sharing your time with us, for envisioning Vienna's allure, and until our paths converge in another corner of the globe.
Stay curious, stay adventurous, and always keep a piece of Vienna in your heart. Goodbye for now.
See you next time, where the past and the present dance a delicate tango, and one city's vibrant heartbeat promises to captivate us all.